Welcome to our show today, The Home Care Companion. I'm Dawn Benninghove, your registered nurse, and our host today. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to be talking about tools for your toolbox and how you can use them in everyday life with seniors who have dementia. So I'm being joined today by Mary Ann Johnson. She is the retired program director for the Greater Richmond chapter of Virginia for the Alzheimer's Association. She wrote their training, education, and care partner programs for the state of Virginia. And she has a master's degree in Christian education with a focus on ministering to aging adults. And I'm proud to say that she's currently the memory ambassador for Companion Extraordinary Home Care Services, of whom I happen to be the owner. So Mary Ann, today we're talking about what can we expect for people with dementia, especially after the holidays. We've just gone through Thanksgiving. We're heading into Christmas. And I know as a nurse that we often see with our patients changes or things that happen with them. So give us an idea. I mean, how does a person feel when that tree has been removed?
That person is going to feel abandoned, I think, that tree has probably irritated them. They probably have undecorated the entire season. But now they're going to feel like you've taken away something that belongs to them. You don't have as many family members dropping in. There's not a lot of clutter around anymore that they've had because you're putting all the Christmas things away. I think that the person is going to feel almost lost. They probably will begin to ask for their mother. They may even think their children are their sisters and brothers. Sometimes if a daughter has gray hair, they might call her their mother too, especially if she looks like her mother. So those are the things that are going to start happening. One of the things that an aide needs to remember is that this person may not remember that you are the care provider. They may feel like that you are someone that's come in and taken over for their family, and where is their family? I think the biggest problem that we have is that they may be resistant to the care.
And I know you said aid, but also we see oftentimes with family members, I know you've seen that, is that they don't remember their family member. And so when family members perhaps don't have care in the home and they are doing this on their own, you and I have both seen that and also experienced it personally with our own family members where we cared for them. And so how can we help with that, Mary Ann? What should we expect if our own family member has become resistant to care? And here we are after the holidays and all those other family members are gone. What can we do? How can we get through this?
Well, the first thing is don't get your feelings hurt when they don't know who you are. That's probably the biggest part of this. Remembering that they have a disease that prevents them from remembering more recent activities. They are probably agitated because they've had all this lively things going on around them, the decorating, the families coming, the big dinners, the whole 9 yards. So I think that the family member must remember that they're not the same person that you had even 2 weeks ago. Each person is going to be different. So where my mother did one thing, your father may have done something else. But the biggest thing is they feel the loss. They may not recognize you as being their daughter or their son. Go with them. Ask them questions. If you have siblings, you can be one of them, and they probably will understand. Ask them questions about, how many children they have. Even though you are one of the children, there may be that brief blip that says, oh, you're my son. So you have to be ready for that because with dementia, you're going in and out of the reality of what's happening around you. And the blinking lights on the Christmas tree, the families, as we've said, all of that has an effect on the person with dementia in that they don't remember who people are.
Right. I remember that with my dad. And in fact, there were times when he thought I was against him. And he would say, "Oh, you too, Dawn? How could that be?" And it was difficult. And especially at Christmas, things would end up missing. He'd say that we hadn't given him a certain gift, or he didn't know what we were talking about. And so how can we handle that? Because that was early on. I didn't know anything about dementia or Alzheimer's or vascular dementia, any of those that we talk about when we say the word dementia. How would I handle that now, Marianne? You know, if he said, "Oh, I never got that," or "No, I don't know what you're talking about," or "No, I haven't seen my sister in 10 years. She never comes to visit." And you as the child or spouse know she was just there last week.
Well, I think you almost have to say, "Oh, really? I didn't realize that." You're always going to have to take these accusations back to yourself. As I said, do not argue. You're not going to win that argument. You cannot reason with them because they don't have that ability. So I think one of the things that you can do is say, "Oh my goodness, I thought they brought it. Let's go on a treasure hunt and see if maybe we can find it. Maybe someone moved this." And if they continue to say, "I didn't get it," "I am so sorry. I did think someone had gotten that for you." Let it go. Don't keep persisting to find it, because they will get agitated and they are going to sometimes strike back and become aggressive. So you need to go where they are. And if they're saying they don't have it, they didn't get it, whatever the present was, it's going with where they are and saying, "I'm so sorry that you didn't get that for your Christmas." Maybe you find it later because they've hidden it. You bring it out and say, "Oh, look what I found. Isn't this wonderful?"
Right.
And with that, you begin to forge a new relationship with this person who has had that broken with all these family members coming in and out.
I remember too, in fact, you taught me this, Marianne, that if we're on a treasure hunt, as you called it, and all of a sudden I found a drawer that had lots of wonderful little knickknacks and things on it, that I could then change the subject and make that occur in a different way. And oftentimes that would break that cycle of him having to look for that. And so that was incredibly helpful. We call that distraction. Those are the kind of things, right, that we can use for family members. Even after the holidays, we may have to increase that distraction technique.
Right. It's trying to break what they're on, because they will stay on the same subject for hours, sometimes days, if you don't break it. I remember with my mom, she was in the hospital and she kept saying, "Where's my brother? Where's my brother?" And I would say, "I haven't seen him for a long time." My cousin, who had the same name, called, and he was on his cell phone, and it went dead. So he called back on, and when it did, she said, "Who was that?" I said, that was Uncle Paul." She said, "No, it wasn't." So when he called back on the landline, I said, "Can you make your voice a little deeper when you talk to her?" So then she had a very nice conversation. "Where are you?" He told her he was taking a break and he was wherever he lives. And she was so glad that he was getting some rest. And she was very comforted by that, because he was the brother she was looking for.
Let's talk about that just a little bit, because you've mentioned that a couple of times now about building perhaps a new relationship, or building a different relationship with them again. So in that example, that's just amazing that, you were able to help him know how to come back around. So after the holidays, how can we, because they may be agitated, they may have some of that, how do we build that newer, different relationship with them?
I think after the holidays, when you're trying to work with them, you really have to agree with them. Try to find out who that person is now. And it may be your mother or your father. It may be a sister or a brother, but you've got to find out where they are in their mind and how you fit in. So if you're a family member, then talking to the person, pointing things on the wall and say, "Oh, that is so pretty. Where did you get that? I think you were married. How long were you married?" I mean, you can ask all kinds of questions. You won't believe what you get as answers. And as the child of someone who has a dementia disease, you do hear some funny things that they did when they were younger, and you can find out how they met with your grandfather or your grandmother. How did they meet? How did they get to know each other? You know, how did they make their marriage last a long time? I mean, those are the kinds of things. You can get your family history from these folks just by changing the subject and going with them where they are and asking the questions.
And that's because that long-term memory is there as opposed to what did you have for lunch today?
Correct.
That's often so much, it's so automatic for us as children or a spouse to just say, well, how was your day today? Or what did you have for lunch? Or, gee, Mom, what are you doing? But that short-term memory is not as quick and not as evident and not even there sometimes. So that long-term memory and building that other relationship, a new relationship, as you put it, is often can become very, very special. One of the things I did want to ask you too is that I know with my grandmother, who also had, she had what I call the true Alzheimer's dementia. And she had a term that people often hear, which is Sundowners. And I know that after the holidays, sometimes that Sundowners actually increases, you know, because we're getting into winter, but also because they've had to expend so much energy from being with family. So can you talk to us a little bit about Sundowners and how do we deal with that after the holidays if we see it increases? And what is it, Marianne?
Well, you know, you have to think about the night and day and the change in the time, the daylight savings time, because it starts getting dark around 4:30 in the afternoon now. Well, there have been lots of lights on over the holidays, so you've got all this light, you don't realize that it's dark outside. Sundowners is really when they become very agitated. They need to go home. It's time to go to bed. Leave me alone. They begin to have that agitation, and sometimes they'll even get out of the house and start walking. So if you remember that Sundowners is exactly that, that's what they call it, that it starts at sundown when it starts getting darker outside. Dark is a fearful thing, if you think about it. If you remember as a child, you looked out a dark window and maybe you saw movement and you were frightened. Well, that same thing happens with them. And one of the ways to handle that is to put daylight light bulbs in your lamps so that it has a brighter view. Pull shades so they can't see outside. Eliminate anything that would make them think it's getting darker. Now, you cannot change the sundown. You cannot change that reaction to the sun going down. But what you can do is keep them more active and involved in a game or music or, you know, something very active that their focus is refocused on you and what's going on. And I think, you know, but you do need to keep your shades down because that does trigger that in their brains.
Well, I know sometimes too, you know, we've talked about people who wander sometimes with Sundowners. It's certainly not always that way, but there are people who like wander. And let's say here we are after the holidays again. We're talking Christmas, snow, ice, really cold weather outside. And let's say they go outside. How do you get them back in, Marianne?
Well, first I would make sure that I had coats sitting at the door so that you can grab those as you go out the door because you're going to need to go with them. And if you walk a short ways and say, I'm getting really cold, how about you? They may say, I need to get to my mother's house. And you can say, oh, look, point to something over to the side. So you begin to get them to turn around. And when they do, say, oh my goodness, I'm so glad we're close to home because it'll be warm in the house. Again, there's really never one answer to this. The biggest thing is changing their perception of what's happening. So by turning them around, not forcefully, but just pointing to different things that you can see, you can redirect them back to the house.
You're so true about it not being just one thing. It is different and individualized for every single person. Mm-hmm. I know we had a friend whose father wandered, and she would say, hey, Jim, because she couldn't call him dad anymore. She said, Jim, do you want to come back in and grab a little hot cocoa with me?